so the July series is over. I suppose there is one more test match, but the series is over. So let's have a look back at all of the games of this series and the players who played, whether you're South African, Argentinian, New Zealand, Australian, Alliance player, whatever it might be, and have a look back at what was impressive, what needed work, and who really, really stood up. So let's start there. Jipper, which 5 players across all the tests stood out to you and why?
Surprise, surprise, I've gone off script. Haven't really been able to get 5.
Okay.
But I think my first one, from a personal point of view, is the Roygaard Barrett Jordan combination in terms of that game drivers and the way the three of them performed together was extremely exciting from an All Blacks point of view. So I think those 3 are definitely, off the back of July, it gives you a lot of confidence going into the rest of the year that they've probably solidified their spots. I think the Lions, I think Beirne and Curry have been massive. When they've needed a big tackle or a desperate tackle or a big carry or a game-changing try, 9 times out of 10, it's been the men in 6 or 7. So I think they're definitely in my top 5. If I was having to whittle it down, I'd probably go Beirne, just for his metrics have been through the roof compared to anyone else in the Lions. And if I was to decide between Roygaard, Barrett and Jordan, you'd probably go Jordan. He's sort of set it alight. Gilliard, is that how he decided? Guillard, the number 8 from the French. I loved everything about him in Tests 1 and 3, and as I said, I think he's a big reason why they didn't have that dominance in the second test. And then Van der Merwe. Mm-hmm. Yeah, nice. He is a little surprise package on the wing for South Africa, and I know he's probably not going to steal the spot of the current, I suppose, frontline wingers for South Africa, but man, they've got some depth in that position, and probably Williams is another one that you could sort of bring in the halfback. But I think in terms of what impressed me off the back, I think his game was. I thought it was Colby for most of the game until he scored that try, and it didn't come up with. That's how strong his game was.
Very similar. I suppose that's one of the great things, the way that they work within the system. They've got players who are elite at working similar ways to each other, really.
Yeah. Well, it's a carbon copy of what they've kind of got with Colby and Arnza. We should know that. But yeah, so that very, very similar skill set in terms of what they've got with that winger there with Van der Merwe. But for me, I've gone pretty similar to Jip. I think the only person that he missed out with for me was that with Holland. I think he's definitely one guy that we touched on in the last 3 test matches, 80 minutes, being able to have 3 test matches, be able to do that as a debutant. Very impressive. The metrics that we touched on in his last test matches, and more so just his whole test matches, has been world class. For the Lions, I've gone Jamison Gibson Park. I think even on the weekend as well, there were 2 instances where I think he was massive in terms of changing the test matches, and I guess with where his game is at the moment, not only his decision making, but his game management and understanding in test match footy what's required. I think he's probably the best in the world, along with DuPont around that. So I've been really impressed with how he's played. I think Sheehan as well. I think Malcolm Marx is a big part of this podcast, and we talk about him a lot. But I think he'd be very close and arguably been one of the best hookers in the world with his skill set, not only just set piece wise and his fundamentals, his core roles, but the way that he can carry the ball as well. He's definitely one guy. He can do it all. So I don't know if he can kick 50. I haven't seen him do a 50-22 yet. Probably haven't watched a lot of time, but but I think that was big for the Lions, and then I think for the South Africans, Van der Merwe was very good for him, and I think Vandenberg as well. The halfback, I think with, you look at Faf de Klerk not being involved in this next part of the Australian series, you have to think that he's a new guy that's coming off. Grant Williams, you've touched on, had a very good series the last 2 games. And I think for France, lastly, I'm getting all the halfbacks in here, Ross, I thought Lagarek as well. Yeah. I thought he was very good for that 3 test match series against the All Blacks. So, yeah, those would kind of be my 5 players, or 6 or 7 that I've just explained, that were good during this June series.
Yeah, so you touched on Holland. Anybody else who was young who you were like...
Well, I think we're going to go to you straight away, because we're both
I hope to see him this weekend.
Very similar.
Yeah.
You'd hope to see him. He gets a crack, doesn't he?
You'd think so.
I have been proven wrong, though. The loose forward trio has been pretty strong for the Lions. But I would love to see him get a crack against Wallabies. Yep. So I just think, I don't know, you talk about fan engagement when he's in and around the ball, even after he's done something, the way he reacts, he's all smiles, all energy, and it's hard to not get behind
He's
and
a
like.
bit of a like or hate him kind of guy if you're the opposition.
Yeah, well,
eh?
I'm starting. Obviously, I haven't seen a hell of a lot of him in the England Premiership, but I am starting to hear that there is. He doesn't mind getting under the skin. He doesn't mind celebrating something about his ice cold veins and stuff. I'm not so big into that, but from what I've seen as a player, he is definitely. He gets your attention, like him or hate him, he's going to get your attention, which is probably a strong thing. I also think not only on Holland, I think Karefi was massive. I think getting thrown in late, he was huge. And I think Ollie Norris, I think his transition, sometimes some players, especially in the type 5, they look like they fit Test match level footy, and he certainly did. Like, he made great impact off the bench, physically, scrummaging wise. We know the French, doesn't matter how many players they have across the top 14, the scrum is a big part of their pride or their DNA as a type 5. So it wasn't an easy assignment, and I think he made every post to win it.
Yeah, and I also think for the Australians, Max Jorgensen, he's been awesome in terms of, you sometimes forget that he's like only 20 years of age, and I think he was put into the environment pretty quickly, and unfortunately a few injuries when he first got selected, wasn't able to get on the field. But look, I love everything about him in terms of his work rate off the ball. He loves chasing kicks. He's very good in terms of, I think, just his attack and his speed, and he's got courage as well. He's got a lot of courage in a lot of areas of the game, whether it's on the attacking side of the ball or defensively as well. So he's probably one guy that I think has been given an opportunity and has played very, very well in the Test matches.
And I'm going to steal a terminology from Leo McDonald, but he always said, in a chase line or on a hard ball get, where's your competitive edge? Who's going to win that competitive edge? And that's what Jorgensen has. If there's a 50-50, 9 times out of 10, he normally dives on it, or he'll rip it out of your hands in the air, or if it's a chase to force you or corral you into a corner defensively, he'll be the one that makes that big effort. There's been big tickets on him, like both league and rugby wanted him. He chose rugby, and I think they're building a phenomenal little back three. Potter's pace, you've seen what he could do for the force. They're building a little I suppose treasure chest of X factor that's only going to grow and develop, and Jorgensen will be a big part of that.
Okay, what about the wider game? What's excited you about the wider game, Jipper, from what you've seen through July? Not necessarily a player, but maybe the way things are played.
I think probably the initiative to keep the game going. The Lions are probably the biggest example because it's not what we used to, but I think across all of July, it has been a mindset of trickery, trying to get that one up, staying on 24/7 with the quick throw-ins, the line-out innovation of the All Blacks. So all that sort of manipulation in play or manipulation of desperation to be first is what I really enjoyed, and normally the right team that displayed those characteristics won. And I think it's an area that probably South Africa have been dominating in that innovation space for a long time, but you can see across every sort of test match that all nations are starting to catch up and wanting a part of the action. Maybe not catch up, because I don't think you'll ever catch up with Russie, but I think that they're trying to put their own I suppose DNA attached to that innovation and that up tempo, keeping the ball in the field of play. And the numbers, a lot of the tests were over 40 minutes ball in play, and I just think it's been a great spectacle across the board.
I think that's the biggest thing that I've loved seeing in the June series, not only from us, because our DNA is to attack, and we've wanted to try attack, and we've probably seen that in the first 3 test matches against the French, having an ability to want to attack with ball in hand. Now we've probably touched on in the last couple of weeks the physicality and us being able to get over the advantage line, which in turn has been able to have our backs being able to swing together and being able to score tries off that really good hard work from the forwards, which has been great, I guess, for us as Kiwi fans to see that happening. But then I also look at the Lions and how they've played. We've talked around Finn Russell, their Curry, Beirne, whoever's been on the edge, Pollock being able to, I guess, attack with ball in hand, being able to do square hands, good ball carries on the edge. And then the South Africans, their brute physicality is still in their DNA and they're able to go to that. But we've talked around their attacking kicking games with Delande, Fussy, LaRue, whoever it may be, to be able to not only just attack with ball in hand, but with those attacking kicks, and they've also got their line speed defence. So I think the game's in a really good spot because I think, we probably think around 2 years ago, that kicking game was a big part of it to try and build pressure because the defence pressure was so hard and the physicality at the breakdown on the attacking side of the ball. But it just seems that teams are wanting to play with the ball in hand. And you look at the Springboks, the All Blacks, and probably the British and Irish Lions, they've been the good, the beginning of, hopefully, a change in world rugby when it comes to international rugby holding the ball.
I think the officials as well need a lot of credit because they've allowed the game to keep going and they've allowed things that maybe potentially would have been brought back for being 2 centimetres off the mark. They've just allowed it to go. And I know we've just spent most of the show talking about one mistake, but I do think it's who would be a referee? It's brutal. But I think in the most part, it's been you haven't heard about a referee decision until this Lions game. It's been about the rugby and how it's been played, which is, I think, a sign that things are in the right space. And I think the game is turning towards maybe there is a little bit of an advantage on attacks now in the way they've manipulated that rush defence and finding ways to work it down. It's just I suppose the first team or the first defence coach to say enough's enough and bring back something that's going to challenge the attacking structures. But there's been a lot of points scored, which I think is great.
Yeah.
Not if you're a defensive coach, but great for a fan.
And how long till the South Africans get here? 41 days, is it, or something like that?
The first game is the first week of September.
Yeah,
so
we've got to be able to concentrate on what's in front of us, but it's just around the corner, which is going to be great.
One step at a time.
One step at a time.
Got to go to Argentina.
Which is going to be tough, which is a tough place to play. And I think you probably look at the Argentinians, just a bit of consistency would be great for them. Probably not against us, against whether it's not us, but against the South Africans or the Australians. Just a level of consistency, because when you saw that British and Irish Lions game and how they played under limited preparation, they're very, very hard to beat. So I think for the Rugby Championship, if the Wallabies can continue to play like they did on the weekend and finish that off with a third Test match with hopefully a win or similar of the way that they played, I think Rugby Championship's in a really good place to be a hell of a series.
Yeah, especially with the fact that you're going back to back against other countries, which makes the next part of it, the second test is so much more interesting when you've made that little adaptation, you've made your little changes, you've tweaked your team, you've done whatever it might be. To me, that makes the championship so much more interesting than kind of one-off test here, one-off test there, and it's split because of the travel and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
it's so much better, and it's you just pocket it into little tours in your own head, and we're focused on Argie, and we know that they can be a dangerous weapon, but I also like to think that the Wallabies can grow in confidence and really challenge the South Africans over there, because I think if it was to be extremely tight coming back this way, with obviously South Africa coming down here and Argentina going to Aussie, it sets up for the engagement. Obviously I say all this because I never have the intent of the All Blacks losing, but any time it's close or there's a potential for an upset, it breathes life into rugby. Rugby, I think is in a really good spot in terms of the viewership numbers and stuff. It is starting to fly again, and sometimes we don't control that narrative well in rugby, but I definitely think everywhere you go and you're walking out amongst the public, and people just want to talk footy, and it hasn't been positively talk footy.
And you hate talking footy.
Oh yeah, absolutely love it. I mean, I was down in Whangamata on the weekend, and someone suggested we should have he's going on tour to Argentina. He suggested we should have a show over there. I said, you're onto something, but I don't know if the budget goes that deep.
I'm sure we can find a steakhouse to do it.
He was very excited to talk about the steak and red wine. I said, I don't drink red wine, so I can't help you there, but the steak is very good.
It's funny, I think I was at the Northcote Tavern yesterday just for dinner, and one of my good mates, Leon, he was just talking. I think we actually talked around for 10 minutes of the incident of what we had on the weekend, and this isn't even an All Blacks game. So it's great for the fact that people are actually watching are engaged, and especially with the British and Irish Lions, you're going to be engaged. But it was great to talk about, I guess, the you know, the different opinions and what, you know, your layman's terms that are thinking in terms of what they thought of that decision. So yeah, I think rugby's in a really good spot, being able to, you know, having these conversations openly.
Yeah, I had the same thing at a 3-year-old birthday party. It wasn't a 3-year-old, but it's exactly the same. You know, a bit of chocolate cake and a bit of chat about rugby. Well,
that's not too bad. You get chocolate cake out of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, a bit different at the North Coast Tavern.
Yeah, beautifully made too, Lana. Well done, it's a good cake.